So welcome to the third Make in India conference hosted by Impact Media and Events Corporation. We have so far done 2 such conferences this year. First one was on travel, tourism and hospitality in March, and the second was on IT and manufacturing in October. Today's event's theme is infrastructure. The purpose of this Canada-India bilateral conferences is to bring the various stakeholders in these sectors together, whether it is the political leaders, policymakers, private and institutional investors, prominent business leaders, and others. We are now also following up on these virtual events with in-person roundtables to take the ideas exchange forward and make things happen on the ground. Apart from these Make in India conferences, we also host annual gala events with a major India at 75 gala coming up in May 2022, Canada-India Education Forum, provincial and interprovincial conferences, and several other activities. Infrastructure is key to a nation's survival and growth, whether it is roads, bridges, highways, smart cities, power generation and distribution, schools, hospitals, railways, airports, pipelines, utilities, or industrial parks. Each subsector offers tremendous opportunities for job growth and multiple other direct and indirect benefits. Canadian technology and know-how has always played an important role globally, and the Canadian companies as well as many institutional investors, including large pension funds from Canada, are actively engaged and invested in India's infrastructure and other sectors. At a time like this, when all countries are struggling to go back to pre-pandemic normal, this is the right time to discuss how Canada and India can work together in this vital sector for mutual benefit, especially when the government of India has just announced a major push for infrastructure with a national infrastructure plan called Gati Shakti, worth 110 lakh rupees or almost $2 trillion. We have a stellar lineup of speakers and organizations who will share very valuable insights and experiences with us today. Before we begin, let me thank our sponsors today who support these events: Efficience Canada, Skylink Capital Corp, Pavi Bidding, ICICI Bank Canada, SBI Canada Bank, One Place, Akal Insurance, Home Hotel and Resort. A special thank you to our presenting sponsor for 2022, Tangential, and especially to the High Commission of India, whose support and guidance has made all this possible, and to Nagasarat Pandurangi for always being there for us as a strong tech backup. With that, please join me to welcome the Acting High Commissioner of India to Canada, His Excellency Anshuman Gaur, to deliver the welcome remarks. I believe he will also be making a PowerPoint presentation. So before that, let us take a quick look at the AFC's profile. Mr. Anshuman Gaur joined the Indian Foreign Service in 2001. He has since served in various capacities in the Indian embassies at Paris and Nepal, and with the permanent delegation of India to UNESCO Paris. At the headquarters, he served on Bhutan desk as officer on special duty in the external publicity division and as a director looking after Western European affairs. Mr. Gaur also served as officer on special duty to the Vice President of India and as a private secretary to the Law Minister of India. He speaks English, Hindi, and French. He is married to Ms. Apurva Srivastava, presently the Consul General of India in Toronto. They have 2 daughters. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vipulji. Thank you for that very generous introduction. And welcome to all our panelists, Mr. Wallace, Mr. Campbell, people joining us from India. I believe we will also have shortly the Minister from Alberta joining us if he is not already connected with us. Again, it's always a pleasure to join Vipul Jani and his team at IMEC for the wonderful sessions that we have had in the past on Make in India. And today to talk about infrastructure is something we certainly look forward to. About 12 years ago, when I was working as a commercial counselor in Paris, I would begin my presentations on India with, do you have an exit policy for India? The subtext being that if you had not had an entry policy for India by 2011, you are already too late, and I won't be wasting my time with you. India is that important to economy. It continues to be important to economy because it's one of the few places which is registering growth and will continue to register growth in all sectors for many years to come. Today, it is the fastest growing economy in the world. The structural changes which we have made in India over the past 6 years, significantly in the last few months under the Atmanirbhar Bharat vision of the Prime Minister, or the Resilient India vision, which posits India as an alternative to the fragile single point supply chains that we have seen in the world and the impact of pandemic on them. In the bounce back, India has surprised many people, although not many of us who knew that our fundamentals will power us to the kind of recovery we are seeing today. Our domestic equity market remains excessively buoyant. It's an indication that both global and domestic players have confidence in the Indian market. We just saw a threefold increase in demat accounts in India. That shows the confidence which domestic investors, retail investors now have in the market. I think the highest FPI inflow was in September this year, almost $3 billion. And it was the largest in all the emerging market economies. We have, in this fiscal so far, we have reported more than 8 billion FPI inflows. And similar the case when we look at FDI, about $82 billion of FDI inflow already this year. Private equity and venture capital investment have risen to their highest level ever in the last decade to over $63 billion. That was last year. And the sectors which have attracted these investments have largely been infrastructure, real estate, technology, healthcare, and financial services. As Vipulji said, infrastructure is key to growth in India. We are very cognizant of that. The government has made a conscious effort to promote and strengthen this sector with massive outlays. We expect our infrastructure sector to be worth more than $4.5 trillion by 2040. I won't talk about in great detail about the schemes and various opportunities that the government has created. We will touch them in passing. I'll focus on 3 specific sectors. But you have heard that about the national infrastructure pipeline with an investment of $1.4 trillion up to 2025. Of this, 21% is expected to come from private equity. To further, give impetus to private investment, a new class of assets by monetization of existing operational and revenue generation assets has been created. Several asset classes have been identified, everything from transmission lines to gas pipeline to logistic parks, to raise money for new greenfield sectors. In conjugation, a massive expansion of India's transportation sector, both in civil aviation and in road infrastructure, creates tremendous opportunities for investment. This is being monitored at the highest level in India. Vipulji mentioned about the PM Gati Shakti program, which basically incorporates all infrastructure schemes from various ministries and the state governments under a single umbrella and for better management and supervision of the thing. Canadian investors have been far ahead of the global investor pack in going to India. We have seen a massive increase in portfolio investment from Canada. All the private sector and pension funds are represented in India today. The total holding of over $55 billion now. They have, in their conversations with us, reflected a continued positive outlook towards Indian market. We have worked with our Canadian investors in some specific areas and addressed some of the issues which they have flagged to us. Some of the changes which have been made in the last two budgets have been specifically at the instance of our Canadian investors to provide them with a better level playing field. Some of these have included things like abolishment of the dividend distribution tax, increase in the foreign portfolio investment limit, general lowering of the corporate taxes. We provide 100% tax exemption to pension funds investing in infrastructure, which was earlier only available to sovereign wealth funds. They are also allowed to make investment through holding companies subject to certain conditions. And several other measures have been put in place to encourage private equity and especially investment from pension funds into India. Brookfield is now the largest foreign equity holder in India. Most of the Canadian funds are represented there. Three specific areas I quickly want to touch about that I think are going to be specifically of great interest to Canadian investors. One is, of course, the launch of the Real Estate Investment Trust and the Infrastructure Investment Trust, REITs and InvITs. Both SEBI and RBI have recently taken steps to make them more attractive for investment. The other class of investment where I think Canadian investors would be very interested in is property or real estate tech. We have seen a range of startups come up in India in the last 2 years. COVID kind of accelerated the technology input into construction, real estate, and infrastructure development. Companies like Traxon, Yojak, SmartVizX, and Infra.market have raised tremendous amount of equity. And this is going to be a sector which is going to continue to attract more investment, especially equity investment. The third area of particular interest to Canadian investors would be the clean energy sector in India. We have set a very ambitious target for ourselves of 450 gigawatts likely to go up in next few years. And that represents a tremendous area of investment and collaboration to Canadian investors. As two major democracies which have accepted the reality of climate change and are committed to addressing it globally, also through domestic action, I think collaboration in green energy and clean energy sector is a fairly given cause. India looks at Canada as a natural partner. Our long shared traditional relationship is based on shared values of rule of law, democratic principle, plurality, and multiculturalism. We also have a huge Indian community in Canada, almost 1.8 million strong now, who act as the bridgehead for several of the commercial ventures and who continue to be the cornerstone of our bilateral relationship. The trade between India and Canada has grown. We have restarted our negotiations for a comprehensive economic partnership and a bilateral investment promotion agreement, which I think both will encourage more investment both ways from between the two countries. So without taking much time, I can promise you that the High Commission in Ottawa and our two posts in Vancouver and Toronto remain at your service. If you're looking at investment opportunity, if you're looking to connect with networks in India, if you're looking for resources, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. And I again welcome all of you this morning to this very interesting conversation and wish you very happy deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for very precise and useful information that you provided. So we would request you to stay with us while we invite some other speakers. So we will now go to Sir Rahul Agarwal, Invest India, and that will be followed by Mr. Prasad Panda and Glenn Campbell, and then we will have a brief Q&A with the first 4 speakers before we go to the next round of speakers. So Mr. Rahul Agarwal, our next speaker, he is the Vice President for Invest India. Rahul has over a decade of experience in infrastructure, financing policy, and corporate strategy. At Invest India, Rahul leads the teams for real estate, infrastructure, and financial investors initiative, which attracts FWFs, pension funds, and PF and PE investments. Rahul has been instrumental in India's first asset recycling project, which saw investments of $1.5 billion and has been working with government and private entities across sectors to introduce new investment opportunities in the country. Rahul has also worked as a consultant for High-Level Committee on Financing Infrastructure, Planning Commission, Government of India. He was instrumental in developing infrastructure section of the 12th 5-year plan of the country and updating model concessional agreements for PPP. Rahul started his career with Bank of America Merrill Lynch as an institutional derivatives analyst, and he holds an MBA in finance and also a certified financial risk manager and is a chartered financial analyst. About Invest India. Invest India is the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency set up under the aegis of the Department for Promotion and, of Industry and Internal Trade, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. Invest India focuses on sector-specific investor targeting and development of new partnerships to enable sustainable investments in India. And they also work actively with several Indian states. So over to you, Rahul.
Thank you so much, Vipulji. I think, first of all, for inviting, organizing this amazing conference and inviting Invest India to share its views on this topic. I think we are talking about infrastructure today, which I feel is an opportune topic with what's happening. But before I really jump into infrastructure, I would like to talk a bit about India. Right, I think His Excellency the Ambassador touched very nicely on how India bounced back very strongly from COVID, and one of the strongest reasons behind that is these 5 pillars, the fundamental pillars of Indian economy. Where I call I have a personal bias against few, right? But young workforce, the booming consumer market, these 2 areas actually collaborate really well and has, is one of the biggest reasons why India could come back. Just to share a very interesting number, in the November 2021, this month, the last month, which we saw about $7 billion worth of private equity and venture capital money moving into Indian startups. So if you really, I'm a numbers person. So if you really just multiply, you're looking at about $100 billion of institutional capital moving into the private, on the private side with startups, with businesses which are, yet to get listed. So that's the power of Indian economy. And then, the largest democracy on the planet. We've continuously showed over years that, how, a country such as large as India, elects, various governments, and the development agenda remains the same. So that's, one of the very, very beautiful part about India. COVID has shown that, we can bounce back very fast, and we are headed towards 10% growth, and we will be, we are and we will remain the fastest growing economy on the planet. Moving from there, I think I mentioned about markets. India, in fact, is one of the top markets across various segments. You look at smartphones, we are the highest consumer of data in the world. On the smartphone per se as well, we are already the second largest smartphone market in the world. We are among the second largest steel producers. among, one of the largest cargoes, as well. One very interesting number I want to show on this slide is the aviation market. It's probably not the best time to talk about it because COVID, that got really disrupted. But for almost a decade, just till the pre-COVID period, we almost grew in excess of about 20%, and became, we at about 340 million domestic market only. And this number is just growing. I think once we settle down from COVID, we are looking for this growth from here to just continue, and markets remain like that. This is very, very interesting. I would want all of you to spend just 30 seconds with me on this slide. Bloomberg did a nation brand tracker survey in 2018, where and especially for this region where we are in East and South Asia, and on various parameters which included the political stability, the currency stability, corruption, cost of production for products, strategic location, etc. And on all of these 10 parameters, they found India to be number 1 on 7 of these parameters in this region. Where we were not the best was infrastructure. Tax privileges, we were just there, and quality of living investors, we were number 3. So, I think if you really put these two together, I think infrastructure and quality of living for investors, that's where, that's what we are talking about today. And that's government's plan now to take, from there to, again, get the higher ranks for infrastructure as well. Indian infrastructure story, if I really talk about it, broadly, how I see the modern infrastructure story for India, starting in late 90s when we first introduced the PPPs in India. That story was very, very interesting. We started working on institutional mechanisms, model concession agreements, model documents on how we execute our PPPs. And every detail around it, whether it's the guarantee structure or banks being prepared for lending to PPPs in India, or the workforce which you require to conduct and manage those PPPs, we created all of that in last 2 decades. And that is why, the first row on this thing is, talks about the operational maturity of PPPs in India is very, very high. ADB, the Asian Development Bank, ranked us number 1 on that. And they also said that we have a very comprehensive institutional framework for private investments in infrastructure. That also shows, why we have over $300 billion worth of PPP projects, over 1,800 projects, which is unforeseen anywhere else in the world. And from there, now we are moving towards, what we call our national infrastructure pipeline, where we plan to invest $1.4 trillion in infrastructure. Broadly in GDP terms, it will be about 8 to 9% of Indian GDP, and to expand it from there. To make it possible, we've launched the National Monetization Plan. His Excellency, the Ambassador, talked about it, and the National Infrastructure Bank as well. I think all of you back in Canada, you've launched the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. On a similar lines, we've launched the National Infrastructure Bank here as well to aid the growth of this $1.4 trillion, which I'm talking about. What is our strategy? I think, and what's really changing in Indian infrastructure? I'm sure, even in Canada, you might have heard that, a lot of fragmented infrastructure development has happened in India. We've got good roads, sometimes we had those connectivity issues to ports or maybe railway lines. Our plan, and specifically the National Master Plan, the PM Gati Shakti, talks about integrating all of these infrastructure in a seamless manner. So that, if I'm moving a cargo from a metro city, say Delhi, putting it in a truck first, and then in a railway line, and then to the port, everything is very, very seamless. So today we talk about integration of our all our infrastructure subsectors in a seamless manner. The next thing which we have been doing over the last 5 years is to make infrastructure investable. If you really go back a few years, it was very, very difficult to invest in Indian infrastructure. We started amending clauses where we allowed that exits for developers were possible, and investors like pension funds and private equity infrastructure funds could invest. So we made that possible. We later introduced REITs and InvITs in the market, and that is what we were talking about. New models is a very, very interesting aspect. We've created opportunities for investors to do that. There's a beautiful example where Mr. Prasad Gadkari will talk about the NIIF, which in itself is a huge opportunity for global investors if they want to enter market. That talks about that, and new avenues. I think you go back 7-8 years, Indian infrastructure would be limited to energy and roads. Today, we can talk about, water supply, we can talk about oil and gas pipelines, airports, that list is just expanding. I'm sure you would not have heard, but today there is a massive expansion going on for city gas distribution as well. And massive infrastructure is being created for that. So new avenues have constantly been created in India, which gives opportunities for investors to participate. Specifically about National Infrastructure Pipeline, I'll not take too much time. It has been covered. It's the Vision 2025. We're going to invest $1.4 trillion. It specifically talks about expanding the infrastructure availability. Just to take the example of roads, we are going to add almost 67,000 kilometers of national highways in India. I'll tell you what is national highways on my next slide. Similarly, on energy front or the airports, we're going to double or maybe quadruple from where we exist today. The High Commissioner mentioned about 21% private participation. If you really total that up, it's almost $350 billion of private capital, which we are planning to attract to Indian infrastructure sector. Now, this is, when we talk about Indian infrastructure, we cannot ignore roads. And national highways is the core of, or I should say, the core of the entire highway network in the country. I just want you to focus on this map, and if you really see, there are a few lines which is our core infrastructure. How we define this is there's a north-south, there's a east-west line, and there is one line which we call as the golden quadrilateral. We are actually moving away from this strategy to what I show you in this one, right? So it's not going to be only core infrastructure, but a grid-like structure, because traffic in India is increasing, and we need to provide them infrastructure availability closest to their, to every destination possible in India. And that's what we are trying to do. We are going to be about 200,000 kilometers in next 5 years. Few numbers for you to see, as in obviously, this talks about the construction opportunity which exists today. And most of it is going to be, on PPPs. And, some numbers are on, right? We have about 32,000 kilometers of PPP roads, which already exist. About $51 billion worth of 161 projects are under construction, and we have about 102 operational PPP projects as well in the country. Now, this is more about the opportunity which is available for construction companies, but I understand there are a lot of investors in Canada. So what we have created is the asset recycling program for investors, long-term investors like pension funds. We created this about 5 years back. What we call is the toll operate transfer model. What we do here is the constructed asset which we have, we lease it out. Essentially, I want to use the word lease loosely for about 30 years against an upfront payment, and the toll right along with the operation and maintenance right goes to the investor for 30 years. We've now done about 5 of these bundles. We call them bundle because we don't give one road. We try and make the asset size a little larger, closer to about $1 billion. And, investors can come invest in this, so they have to essentially bid for the asset and then operate and maintain the road and collect tolls for 30 years. The first one there, the Macquarie actually won it for about $1.5 billion. So we had the base price of about $1 billion, and Macquarie bid that. So this was the model, which I got to work for, and we've been successfully able to expand, investments in this particular piece. Quickly, I mentioned most of the things here, but upfront lump sum payment is what investors have to give. They get about 30 years tolling right. They have the obligation of O&M and toll collection. It's transparent, open, and competitive. So you have to come and you can see what's really happening. Large projects, change in ownership is allowed. So if you want to you buy the asset today and you want to flip it over to somebody else, that's absolutely allowed. There's a very, very interesting element there. If at the 10th and the 20th year, if there is a traffic variation, if you estimated something else, but that did not really realize, there's a clause that you can actually extend the concession agreement based on a predetermined formula. So that gives you a comfort if there are any shortages in the traffic. Obviously, on the other end, if there are excess traffic, there is a slight, or I should say 50% reduction compared to the increase in toll there. And essentially, we've kept termination payments in a manner that political risk does not exist for this asset. Quickly moving to renewable energy. I think this is one of the most looked after. People look forward to this sector a lot. India has done exceptionally well on renewable front. Today, we have about 100 gigawatt of installed capacity and about 75 gigawatt of capacity is under implementation as I am speaking. India has a huge potential for solar. About 749 gigawatt worth of potential exists for solar sector in India, and then followed by wind and other means. What we have noted in this sector is that investors from across the world, the Middle Eastern investors, Asian, as well as North America, including Canada, have invested heavily in the renewable sector. India has committed to net zero as well in COP26, and that talks about how we are going to move from current 100 gigawatt of renewable to 450 gigawatt by 2030, and most likely, I think I can for sure commit that we will exceed that target easily. Railways is very interesting. We have about 8.2 billion passengers traveling, through Indian Railways every year. That's world's population. We've done exceptionally well in last 5 years. I'm sure you would have at some point heard about accidents on Indian Railways. The year before last, I should not talk about the COVID year, the year just before COVID, we did not see a single single passenger death. So the kind of infrastructure improvements we've done has really rewarded us. Now the focus is on expanding to modern infrastructure. We are adding what we call is the dedicated freight corridors to move the freight much faster. If you see these lines, the blue one and the green one connecting Delhi to JNPT, which is the Mumbai port, and Ludhiana, which is again north of Delhi, to Dankuni, which is next to the Calcutta port, the Kolkata port, are already in the advanced stages of construction. We will be able to move. So just to give you some sense on that, we'll be able to move a container from Delhi to Mumbai in about 16 hours and to Calcutta in about 24 hours, which will be reducing the current time which a truck takes by almost 66%. So that's the efficiency we are looking forward to by adding that. In addition to that, we are implementing the high-speed railways, and we are only going for multiple projects therein. I'm not sure if you would have imagined the population of 1.4 billion and railway passengers, which is 8.2 billion. The railway stations have a huge opportunity, probably much bigger than airports. And we are trying to build our railway stations like airports. So, I very strongly recommend you to imagine, what a railway station can do. If airports can make money globally, railway stations in India can make probably 5x of that because of the footfall which we see there. I think railway again is going for a net zero by 2030. There's a 100% electrification project which is going on, which we plan to deliver by 2023. Airports, I mentioned about it. I told you about the passenger growth. We are talking about almost 200 airports by FY40. And this opportunity, I think in India, everyone wants to travel, use the aircraft. They want to travel using the aeroplanes, and that is the reason why we have seen the kind of growth for domestic passengers as well as international. Airports, what we are doing of late is privatizing the existing airports, and 6 of these airports have already been privatized. We have planned to privatize another 13. Essentially, how we do it is we invite global investors to come and offer the highest passenger fee per passenger fee, which and you can take that airport, operate it for long term, and develop infrastructure as you believe fits the best for that airport. From there I bring you to national monetization pipeline. So initially I was talking about the infrastructure pipeline, which was more about constructing, but to fund the construction we are also doing monetization pipeline. I'm sure many of you understand what Australia went through when they did their entire asset recycling model. It's pretty similar to that. We have assets worth 81 billion which have been recognized, which have been found to monetize over next 3 to 4 years. Essentially, it's going to be a long-term concession like model, the way I mentioned TOT. And we have about 20 asset classes across 12 sectors. So, things like dedicated freight corridors, oil and gas pipelines, all are part of the national monetization pipeline. Quickly on this, private equity investments in India have been on a high. I think I'm missing the year 2021 on this slide, but from about 10 billion in 2008, we got about 60 billion in 2021, and I'm hopeful that 2022 should be about $100 billion easily for private equity investments in India, which tells you that smart money is actually coming to India. It's about time that you come to India and reach these gates. LPs, I think this is I'm sure many of you are aware that some of the largest funds in India have deployed money, and many of them come from Canada, and they've taken bets right from infrastructure to real estate, and now how I say they've started taking opportunistic bets as well. You look at CPPIB, they've started investing in startups as well in India. So that tells you the entire story on how investors see it. One thing which I want to add here is that India's pension fund itself is growing by 30%, and in about 10 years from here, and we stand at about 100 billion today. So I think all of you can do the numbers. I think in few years, that fund will become large. So the opportunity to actually enter India is probably 6 to 7 years at the max. So use this opportunity. It's really big one as of now, and then the competition is going to increase. And this is us, Invest India, the National Investment Promotion Agency. We were set up by Government of India to facilitate investors, to help them and handhold them as in their interest. So I look forward to work with all of you, answer any of your questions here today, or later if you want to connect with me or my team, which is there on this forum as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rahulji, for a fantastic presentation. There was a lot of details in those 20 minutes, but we'll be happy to share the presentation with anyone who wants it, especially with the speakers for sure. So thank you once again, and please stay back with us, as I mentioned. So we'll now move to our next speaker, Mr. Prasad Panda. Mr. Panda he is the Minister of Infrastructure, Government of Alberta. He was first elected to the Legislative Assembly of Alberta in a by-election in September 2015 as MLA for Calgary Foothills, and then re-elected in April 2019 as an MLA for the newly formed riding of Calgary Edgemont. Born in Sangam Jagarla Mudi, Andhra Pradesh, India, Mr. Panda has lived in the constituency of Calgary Edgemont for 15 years. A professional engineer by trade, he holds a Bachelor of Technology in Mechanical Engineering and worked in the energy sector for 28 years, including in senior management positions with Reliance Industries Limited, as well as Suncor Energy. Mr. Panda was a key member of the project management teams that has built projects worth over $100 billion, including petroleum, petrochemicals, power, pipelines, and marine infrastructure, and oil sands development projects. During the last legislature, Mr. Panda was a member of the Legislative Standing Committee on Public Accounts, Resource Stewardship, and Alberta's Economic Future. And he served as the official opposition critic for energy and economic development and trade. And he is currently Alberta's infrastructure minister, as I mentioned earlier. So over to you, Mr. Panda.
Namaste. Can you hear me, Vipulji?
Yes, absolutely, sir. Go ahead.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to all of those who joined from different time zones. Here in Alberta, the sun didn't raise that, and we are at minus 30 degrees. But, my heart warms out when Vipulji asked me to come and join on a seminar with Indian officials. So great to see His Excellency Anshumanji, and I want to give a shout out to him and his colleagues, Ajay Baisaria ji, and in our area, Manish ji. They're all doing a great job in Anshumanji and his wife and everyone is doing great job in advancing the economic and cultural ties between two great democracies, Canada and India. And also people like Vipulji and Tejas and everyone working hard to deepen and strengthen those ties. As a Indo-Canadian, I'm always interested and look forward to participate in these kind of discussions. As a Minister of Infrastructure, on behalf of the Government of Alberta, it's my honor to be with you today. So I may be doing injustice to my officials and staff because I skip their notes every time I go talk about India, because I don't need any notes. So I know what's happening there. So I lived there long enough and I still have family back home. So I'm still in touch with many of my former colleagues and everyone. So, but I'm quite impressed what Rahul presented just now. So I definitely want to have a copy of that presentation. And the next thing I'm going to do is ask our Invest Alberta. We also have an investment corporation to attract. It's a kind of single window process. We set up that Invest Alberta to facilitate and accelerate those deals. So I look forward to sign an MOU between Invest Alberta and Invest India soon, if possible. I also see others like Lea, one of the good infrastructure consulting company working in India. I'm in touch with Dr. Raju, your new president there. So they're doing important projects for which are important not only to the nation but to the government, like the projects in Varanasi and other projects. So I'm pleased to see that. And as Government of Alberta, what we are doing to make life better for Albertans and Canadians is invest in modern infrastructure. For that, to actually legislate the criteria of project selection and prioritization. Just 10 days ago, I introduced and passed the Alberta Investment Accountability Act, which will give predictability and also certainty for Albertans and Canadians, what type of infrastructure we're going to invest, considering not only the current needs, but also the future needs. For example, COVID taught us recently, how important is infrastructure to carry on with our daily lives in a pandemic scenario. So, so that's why we introduced that Infrastructure Act. But, people often expect politicians as a magic to build every fancy infrastructure they think of. We have our own limitations of funding because somebody has to pay for it. So that's why our government actually is trying to pursue public-private partnerships to encourage private investments. So which we are on track now because we reduce corporate taxes. In Alberta has the lowest tax, 8%, and we don't have any provincial sales tax. So with all that, Alberta is probably the lowest, one of the lowest in North America out of the 50 states in US and 10 provinces in Canada. Probably we stand the lowest. And also we are on, we cut a lot of red tape to encourage private sector investment. And we are also using Canada Infrastructure Bank to finance vital infrastructure projects like broadband to rural communities or irrigation projects, because Alberta's strength is, natural resources. So we produce a lot of oil and gas. As a cold country, you would appreciate today where I'm sitting in Calgary, it's -30. So without those comforts of the fossil fuels, reliable supply will be freezing. So, but we are also looking at diversifying our economy. We are looking at clean tech. other presenters talked about the importance of renewable and clean energy. So Alberta is the leader in technology development and supplying. For example, I have introduced one of the Alberta companies, Avar. Avar is a geothermal company. We connected them with Reliance in India, who are interested to explore that. Same way, there are many opportunities, but I'm glad to see India has opened it up. Recently, we realized during the previous waves of COVID, there were issues with oxygen supply, for example, in India, because although they have, but they couldn't move it because the roads were not suitable to move 40 feet sea container type trailers across the road. So that's why I'm very pleased to see Government of India is going to invest on roads and airports and seaports. So that's what in Alberta. So to compare between Alberta and India, Alberta, we're not dense population and we are spaced out. That's why we had to maintain these thousands of kilometers of roads and bridges. And we are also focusing on other projects like broadband and aviation, irrigation. So that's where our investments are going. But what is expected from our government is to bring in accountability, consistency in policy, and cut taxes and cut red tape, which we are on track. And that's why recently we could, I'm happy to mention that we could attract companies from India, tech companies, because although we are building on our strengths in energy and, but we are also diversifying our economy. We're doing a lot of value add in our agriculture and forestry, which is a bright spot in our economy. I heard that India is recovering its economy post-pandemic, and you'll have 10% GDP. And Alberta will be the fastest in Canada with 7% GDP growth. So we worked really hard on Alberta recovery plan. We never stopped construction. In my department, we are on track to complete all the projects in construction, like 28 healthcare facilities, top-notch, world-class healthcare facilities, and we are building about 70 schools across the province, a lot of justice infrastructure. So when you talk about infrastructure, it touches every sector. So it's essential to deliver programs like much needed, the delivery of public programs. So it could be economic infrastructure like trade corridors, roads and bridges, airports, and all that, or social infrastructure like I mentioned, hospitals, schools, or the pipelines, which are essential in a big country like Canada. So we are focusing on all that, but there is a lot of potential between India and Alberta, and India and Canada. You mentioned companies like Fairfax, our good friend Prem Vatsa's group. They invested in aviation infrastructure there. Brookfield bought pipelines from my previous employer, Reliance. I mentioned air cargo, somebody mentioned. So Alberta airports like Calgary and Edmonton, they're on the important route to US. So all the cargo that right now you're transitioning in Alaska, Alberta airports will provide you very low cost options and for refueling. And also our runways are much wider and longer, suitable for any sort of aircrafts. So there are a lot of opportunities. And our Premier, Jason Kenney, which Vipulji and others on the call are familiar, he's a good friend of India. He wants to develop. I mean, he was part of developing those relations in the past as a federal minister, and he can't wait till the COVID ends, and so we can go and sign up those memorandum of understandings and connect private sector investors, because there are a lot of opportunities. And recently I introduced him to my good friend, Tata Group Executive Chairman, Mr. Chandrasekharan. We invited him. He's waiting for the COVID to end. We're talking to other companies like biotech. I spoke to Dr. Krishna Allah, and I know that one of the Alberta companies he has signed and exploring opportunity with the BioE. I spoke to Mahima Datla. She said they're negotiating that deal. There are a lot of opportunities in Alberta and Canada for Indian companies. But as our job as politicians is to provide that consistent, transparent, accountable policies, so investors have certainty. We heard about the difficulties in the past. When governments change, we should not be tempted to undo what the previous governments did, like tearing off contracts, like power purchase agreement contracts or anything. That won't give certainty and predictability to investors, particularly Canadian investors. They are very good partners, but they look for ease of doing business and predictability. And we had to create the trusting relationships. As soon as the COVID ends, we would invite all the Indian companies to come and look at our opportunities in Alberta and Canada, particularly in Alberta, because we are going to open it up for clean tech, and there are opportunities in hydrogen, for example. We want to build a lot of industrial plants producing hydrogen. We already had few projects announced, 3-4 projects. We're also looking at carbon capture and sequestering. That's other opportunity for Indian companies. I heard that India is looking at 1,000 gigawatts. So that's, if your land base is not enough, Canada is a large country, second largest in the world, and so there are opportunities, because although it's cold here, -30 in Alberta, but the sun shines most of the time. So your companies can come and look at Alberta as a potential opportunity. So as I said, I can't wait to connect Invest Alberta and Invest India. And with the help of Anshumanji and his colleagues, we'll try to move forward that agenda. But glad to be here. We would like to take questions, but I'll stop there. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Minister Panda. And I must say, you are one of the most approachable, most down-to-earth political leaders I have come across in my 22 years in Canada. So thank you for always being there, always joining us. And for sure, I will share the presentation with you and connect you to Rahul as well. And hope to see that MOU materializing soon between Invest Alberta and Invest India. Hello, Amarjot ji, how are you?
Good morning, Vipulji. I'm good. How are you?
Good, good, good. So I believe you are not driving. So we have
No, I'm not.
Okay,
Vipulji, can you take a quick screenshot of everyone? If everyone can turn on their cameras and look at the cameras. So just to put on our social media.
Sure. Time for a quick group photo, everyone.
Mr. Yadav, are you able to turn on your camera?
Rajat ji.
Okay, that's fine. I'll do it at the count of 3. Okay, everyone look, smile. 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay, we'll do it again. Mr. Yadav, okay. Join in at the count of 3 again. 1, 2, 3. Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Tejas. All right, so let us go right next to our next speaker, Sir Glenn Campbell. Nagasrat, if you can bring up the introduction slide, please. or Mr. Glenn Campbell. Nagasrat.
Just a second, Vipul.
Yeah, sure. We are just running about 10 minutes over, so somewhere along the way, we'll have to catch up.
Hope, is it visible?
Yeah, because for some reason the last line always cuts off. But anyway, Glenn Campbell, our next speaker, he is the Assistant Deputy Minister, Investment, Partnerships and Innovation at Infrastructure Canada, which involves major project development and fostering partnerships with the private sector using alternative finance and delivery models. His responsibilities include support for the Canada Infrastructure Bank, as well as promoting public-private partnerships and use of innovative finance in the public infrastructure space. He is also responsible for federal major bridge construction projects and oversees portfolio coordination of Crown corporations, such as Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority and Jacques Cartier Champlain Bridges Incorporated in Montreal, as well as federal interests in Waterfront Toronto Revitalization Corporation. Previously, he was ADM of the Canada Infrastructure Bank Transition Office, Director General Financial Institutions at Finance Canada, responsible for domestic financial sector policy, covering banking and insurance. His prior role at Finance Canada was as the Director General, International Policy and Analysis, covering international financial institutions as well as global economic policy coordination under G20, G7, and IMEC, and served as the Senior Finance Official for APEC. Earlier in his career, Glenn was posted as Finance Counselor in New York during the global financial crisis. While most of his career was at Finance Canada, he has varied experience across federal departments, including Global Affairs Canada, Industry Canada, and the Treasury Board Secretariat. So over to you, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'll try to abbreviate my remarks in the interest of time. Thank you, Mr. Jani, and also good day to the High Commissioner and Mr. Minister Panda. I'm very pleased to join you today to foster collaboration and a shared experience and infrastructure between our two countries. As pointed out, my role focuses on alternative finance and how to adopt and learn from others on leveraging private investment through partnerships to foster innovation and solve public policy challenges and infrastructure. Before getting into specifics, let me share a few points to underscore my keenness to speak to you today. On the personal front, I'm married to Indo-Canadian diaspora, my wife, and her father-in-law who grew up in Mumbai. And I've had the pleasure to visit and travel across India many times. And over the past 20 years, I've seen a lot of the progress and opportunities firsthand. On the professional front, in my past roles at the Finance Ministry, I was also the lead on the Canada-India Financial Sector Dialogue, and where we talked about collaboration between Canada, India, and banking and insurance. And prior to that, collaborated with India in major G20 activities, including co-chairing of the key macroeconomic framework committee for several years, in really good collaboration between Canada and India on the global stage. For the past 5 years, I've led Canada's efforts at the national level in promoting P3, PPP infrastructure opportunities, and as you know, led the transition office to create the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Similar to India, the path to closing our infrastructure gaps must include leveraging the private sector investment and expertise, and governments as well as the private sector need to be informed investors. In Canada, the majority of public infrastructure is owned and managed by our provinces and territories and the municipal level, as pointed out by Minister Panda. And of course, they have a lot more experience in direct planning, building, and delivering on a day-to-day basis and face many of the infrastructure challenges really at the local level. Federally and at the national level, we have our own assets and challenges, but largely focused on how we use national funding to determine and shape shared priorities and appropriate burden sharing over projects and infrastructure. Part of this is determining what are national priorities, which is why we are launching a new national infrastructure assessment and seeking to determine which challenges are better suited to government funding or where alternative and innovative approaches can be used to relieve the burden on the taxpayer. Canada as a whole has been contributing its expertise, cooperating and learning from others' experience through the OECD as well as G20's Global Infrastructure Hub. Both international organizations doing an excellent job of collecting and disseminating knowledge and expertise in infrastructure, P3 in project finance, including from both Canada and India, I might add. I was pleased to see recently India present its approach and new initiatives in public-private partnerships to the Canada Council for Public-Private Partnerships, a major global conference held here in Canada last month, and it echoes some of the comments mentioned today about how advanced India is becoming in the P3 market. Very, very formidable. India has some exciting opportunities around monetizing assets and asset recycling, and looking at ways to crowd in private finance to help solve public policy challenges, whether roads, water, wastewater, electricity, and broadband, and then other sectors. We've really taken note. Of high note is our two largest pension funds, Canada Pension Plan and Investment Board, and Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, have recently invested considerably for a 50% share in India's National Infrastructure Trust. This will be an extension of investments in Indian toll highways and other assets. These Canadian funds, including AIMCO, that I know is speaking a little bit later, and pension funds like them as part of the Maple 8, or private funds like Brookfield, which I heard earlier, represented by others on today's panels, are really keenly interested in investing in India. And I would hope Indian investors are keenly interested in reciprocating the opportunities in Canada, include those that Minister Panda had set out, particularly in Alberta, but also elsewhere. In Canada, we are still in early stages of adopting more revenue models where infra is priced to create revenue streams to attract private investment. We're perhaps a bit more focused on greenfield investment and where risk can be transferred in new builds, a little bit more sensitive on the brownfield, but we're both learning from what India is doing and other countries. So we're watching very closely what our peer countries are doing to deploy these new models, and also looking keenly at the public reaction. We have revenue models in electricity and transit, but we remain behind on roads, bridges, water, and wastewater, and we look forward to learning from India's progress in the future. In terms of new priorities, Infrastructure Canada and the Government of Canada have engaged on a national infrastructure assessment initiative, as I mentioned, to help guide future needs and priority setting. That will really help guide at the national government and hopefully coordinate provincially as well, developing a pipeline of projects, both publicly and privately, that will help draw attention to where investment is best placed, both government and private sector. Let me conclude by talking about some clear priorities going forward. We center around two themes, and we think they'd be the same in Canada as in India. One is reducing GHG emissions and our carbon footprint in building and operating infrastructure, whether public or private. And two, building more resilient infrastructure that mitigates the severe impact of climate change. Both of our countries have been inflicted with severe weather and events, with Canada dealing with severe flooding in BC and Atlantic Canada, and high fire incidents and threats across Canada, particularly in the West, and melting permafrost in Northern Canada. We need to encourage our supply chains and infrastructure ecosystem to continue to innovate and build more carbon-sensitive infrastructure, and to develop new means and methods to build cleaner and more resilient infrastructure. This is an area of global importance, and I trust our cooperation can continue in mutual investing in our economies, sharing best practices on models and approaches to funding and financing, but also sharing technological solutions through business-to-business relationship. In closing, also note Invest in Canada and the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service and Export Development Canada being available in the ecosystem to help facilitate further trade. Thank you very much. Look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell, for the precise and brief to the point remarks. Really appreciate that. And so also good to know that you have a very strong connection to India. So, waiting for your next trip to India. Maybe we can share some experiences. All right. So before we go to our next speaker, Terry Wallace, I think it is best now to break up the sessions and take up our first Q&A session for the first 4 speakers. So I have 2 questions for each of the first 4 speakers, and in the interest of time, if you can keep your answers a bit brief, so that we can then go back to the session 2. So I will start with the High Commissioner Anshuman ji. My first question for you, sir, is that infrastructure projects often run into litigations, environmental clearances, land acquisition issues, face center-state coordination issues with different party-led governments having different priorities sometimes, as Mr. Panda just mentioned. So how are these challenges being mitigated?
Thank you, Vipulji. And just quickly, the new infrastructure project from very conceptual stage in India are being de-risked in several measures being built into it. One is the importance that has been accorded to the participation of state governments, because they are in India, like in Canada, being a federal government, a federal structure. The state governments are largely responsible for several of the aspects that you have mentioned, including land acquisition. So these aspects are now being handled much more carefully, much more closely monitored under a large de-risking program that is making the projects inherently less litigious, I should say, in terms of risks as we go ahead. The second, which I touched upon briefly, is the integration of all the project monitoring and management under various umbrella schemes. Like the Gati Shakti allows us to have a geospatial framework under which all the projects of infrastructure in India are being mapped using precise mapping from ISRO. This allows, reduces the friction space, which often involves in terms of property rights and lack of records, which prompt the litigation in first place. So these are some of the de-risking strategies which India is using for some of the major projects as we move ahead.
Thank you for that clarification, sir. My second question for you is, you work with Canadian companies, pension funds, and business leaders on a daily basis. While the official government-to-government ties may be performing a little bit under potential for a while, it is the private sector that is largely driving the bus these days, or at least that's the impression. What do you hear from the Canadian C-suite executives about what are they most optimistic about and what concerns do they want addressed so that they can participate more enthusiastically in the growing India story?
Absolutely, Vipulji. I'm so glad that you asked us that. I think the growth trajectory of India-Canada relationship is a testimony itself to the kind of strong complementarities which exist between the two economies and the confidence which Canadian CEOs have, especially the heads of the various investment organizations in Canada, on the strength of Indian economy. See, there is an asymmetry. Canada has a population of 38-39 million. This is a G7 country, but the overall market size of Canada is quite limited. And Canada is still essentially a primary product exporting nation. My biggest portfolio from Canada is of primary products. So that's why, places like Saskatchewan figure very highly in our bilateral trade. So the trade has grown over the last 5 years, as have investments. Most of the investment has come in terms of private equity and portfolio investment from Canada. And that itself, the Canadian investors have put their money where their mouth is. The investment have risen from 5 billion 2015 to over 55 billion today. And that itself is an indicator of the confidence which the Canadian CEOs have. Over 1,000 companies are now located and doing business. Canadian companies are located and doing business in India. We see increase in number of business visas, for example, as COVID winds down. That shows that there is a desire for people to go and engage India. We have seen an increased number of business queries, both from India and from Canada, in terms of engaging on a commercial basis. So moving forward, we see commerce and investment and trade as being the driver of our bilateral relationship. I mean, the political noise is there, and like India, Canada is a multifaceted, noisy, thriving democracy. It's only natural that those noises will be there. But the core of our relationship, I think, is gradually moving towards a more commercial, more business-oriented, more business-led relationship, which I think is how it should be.
Thank you, sir. 55 billion, 1,000 companies, that's fantastic to hear. And we hope to see that number double over the next few years, hopefully. So my next question is for Rahul Agarwal for Invest India. Again, two questions for you, Rahul, as well. My first question for you is private sector investment in roads and highways through the PPP route was 25,999 crore rupees around 2015, or 42%, which came down to 25,000 crore rupees, or 16%, around 2019. While the bank loans for this sector also came down from 15.2% in fiscal year 2015 to 11.5% in 2018. So what efforts are being made to reverse the tide in both the private sector investments and bank loans for this critical sector?
Thank you. I think that's a very well-researched question. So I think there was a change in strategy in how we were building our roads. So till 2014, 2015, we were doing a lot of PPPs, right? The BOT style PPPs in roads. There were issues there. I think the primary issue was that the same developer had to take the construction risk as well as the traffic risk. And I think you've seen that's generally not the easiest, and taking both these risks make the capital very, very expensive. So from 2015 onwards, actually, we changed our strategy a bit. We divided the traffic risk and the construction risk separately. So what we started doing is that most of our construction today is happening either in EPC or a hybrid annuity model, as we call it, which means that the capital required from the private sector for constructing roads, that requirement went down substantially, making it cheaper to construct roads in India. So that's why you see those numbers, right? So the private sector was not taking loans from the banks. Neither they were investing their own capital. They were actually focusing on constructing best quality roads at the best possible price. Once these roads were constructed, that was the time when we started, inviting global pension funds and private equity investors to come and acquire those roads and use that capital, from that acquisition process to again construct the road, which is that our asset recycling model. So that was there. We again want to go back to the standard BOT model, but on limited number of roads where risks are minimized. As I think the High Commissioner talked about the land acquisition environmental concerns, the way we've handled that. So only on certain projects where we have taken, we have made sure that those risks do not exist for private sector, as well as we see high feasibility for those projects. Only there we want to invite BOT projects. Otherwise, we want to reduce the cost and go on with what we are doing right now.
Fair enough. So the second question for you is, while the large pension funds and big Canadian companies are already investing in India, what efforts are being made to reach out to smaller funds and companies in Canada, and in the overall global investment in India's infrastructure sector, where does Canada stand as of today?
And I think for institutional investments, specifically in infrastructure and real estate, I think Canada is, I think I've not done numbers, but I think most likely you are at 1, maybe 2. I've not really done numbers at that level. But I think on the first part of the question, for reaching out to smaller funds, I think this team which I represent, the Financial Investors Initiative team, we reach out. We reach out to every investor in the country, in Canada, or elsewhere as well, to tell them the opportunities, and I can confidently tell you that we are in touch with a lot of pension funds, much smaller in size, for investing in India. Invest India per se, we work with all all size of companies, whether it's a startup or a large scale corporation, and we are very happy to facilitate on investors at that level. So that's the one part of it. The second part is that I think we have created opportunities in India where smaller investors can also participate. So the likes of InvITs, I think we recently had a InvIT for transmission. So one of our public sector undertakings for transmission, which we call Power Grid, where any investor, as in any institutional investor of of any size, can actually come and invest in India. We have the NIIF, which invites institutional investors to participate and invest with them, who do not have large capacities on the ground to invest as well. So we are open to all sizes and happy to handhold and facilitate them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahulji. So, Minister Panda, I'm coming next to you. My first question for Minister Prasad Panda. You have worked on massive infrastructure projects in India and now oversee the infrastructure ministry for Alberta, making you the ideal candidate to bring Canada and India closer on this particular file. So where do you see the possibilities and potential, especially between Alberta and India? And if the potential is not being fully met right now, why do you think that is the case? Mr. Panda?
Sorry, I was muted. That's a very good question, Vipulji. The potential has not met because we heard from Anshuman that they want their infrastructure investments to be tripled in a few years, which is a very ambitious goal. $4.5 trillion. Canadian companies, although as Rahul said right now, they have a presence there. They may be high in numbers right now, but that's nowhere near the potential, because Canadian companies have capacity and they have the expertise, because Canada is a large country. So as I said, we are sparsely populated, and unlike India, which is densely populated. So we need to create infrastructure and maintain it. So our companies have expertise, our governments, provincial governments, each government has expertise. So there is a lot of opportunity out of that $4.5 trillion. That's a big cake. And Canadian, I know I'm competing here with my good friend. I saw Amarjot there, and I know Anshuman is trying to create a tension there between Saskatchewan and Alberta to compete, and Alberta is ready to, with the help from people like Glenn. I'm glad to hear he's son-in-law of India. Me being Amchi Mumbaikar, it's more important that your in-laws are from Maharashtra. So with good ambassadors like that, when they collaborate with our Indian bureaucrats, like the consular generals in Toronto and Vancouver, our companies can step up and help India. What India needs to do is to cut the red tape and facilitate that. I have seen that from private sector, from my past life, having worked on mega projects in Gujarat. It's a possibility. Canadian companies can contribute, but we had to cut that red tape, and there is a lot of potential. And India is also fastest growing economy, and Canadian companies, particularly Alberta, can feed with our agricultural products. We can beat Saskatchewan for sure. Scott Moe, I spoke to him. He's very, he's very eager to even increase that business between Saskatchewan and India. Same thing with Doug Ford, and I'm sure Amarjot will talk about that. He'll do his sales speech, but we are all eager to come and have a reasonable share of that and be part of that growth story of India.
Sure. So the second question is, Alberta is facing multiple challenges, both within the Canadian policy perspectives and from the once reliable partner in the United States. Whether it is Keystone or Enbridge Line 5, or we don't know what might come up next year. Alberta is also prepared a 20-year strategic capital plan, as far as I understand.
Yeah.
Where do you see your province 5 to 10 years from now emerging from today's challenges? Because a healthy and prosperous Alberta is vital for a healthy and prosperous Canada as well.
Absolutely. That's actually, I forgot to mention yesterday, we released that 20-year strategic capital plan. That was part of the Infrastructure Accountability Act I introduced and passed in Alberta legislature 10 days ago. With that came this 20-year strategic capital plan, which is a long-term. It's not just, so each budget year, we bring in capital plan, which gives the forecast for the next 4 years or 3 years. Whereas this 20-year strategic capital plan looks at the long-term emerging trends, not only the current trends, but the emerging trends with the improvement in technologies and modern infrastructure needs. That's why we introduced that. I hope that will provide the opportunity for future governments to plan infrastructure ahead. But you mentioned most of Alberta's exports are all going to one country. So we are dependent on one customer because all our pipelines are going only in one direction, which is south to United States. So we are selling. It's not just Alberta, it's the Canadian product, which is sold at a discount to US because we are struck with only one customer. Whereas on the other hand, India, with, they need 1,000 gigawatts of energy. It takes time to get there. In the meantime, Alberta and Canada has a potential to provide that energy security for India. So we need to look at that. And I'm counting on all 1.8 million Indo-Canadians to speak up and represent to the government of Canada, because they have the lead. I can talk endlessly on the bilateral relationships, but Alberta don't have the jurisdiction. Government of Canada has the jurisdiction. And we need government of Canada to take the lead in diversifying not only the products, but also diversifying the markets. Countries like India, the fastest growing countries with 800 million young population, middle-class population with growing aspirations. So Canada can feed and fuel, as I said before. So, but we need government of Canada's help. And all of you, I encourage you to represent to the federal government as well. And Alberta will play our part. And provincial governments are very eager to work with India. As I said, government of Ontario, government of Saskatchewan, those two premiers I spoke a few times, and our premier is very, very, very keen in advancing those relations, so both trade relations and also cultural relations.
Thank you, Mr. Panda, for that. So now this is the next set of questions are for Glenn, and then we'll go to our second session with Terry Wallace, Deepak Darda, and Ahmed Mubashir. So my first question to you, Mr. Campbell, is Canadian technology and Canadian investment in India's infrastructure sector is growing, mainly through private efforts as of now. Now that Canada is facing challenges with China and also with the US on several key infrastructure projects, how keen is Canada today and in the days to come to reach out to and work more closely with India in this sector and beyond?
Thank you for the question. And let me just support what Minister Panda had said, and in full agreement that Canada has always needed to diversify its markets, and particularly those growing markets, India included. And it's very important we set up really the policy frameworks and the trade-related frameworks, and then encourage our mutual private sectors to really do that country-to-country, business-to-business connection where capital flows and technology go hand in hand. And I think India does present, continues to present a real opportunity, and followed by our pension funds, which I hope and other infrastructure funds, that they also encourage deeper supply chain considerations along the lines that Minister Panda had mentioned, is making sure that we're not just managing capital flows in particular projects, but as they're being procured, are we really thinking about the wider net that benefits both countries? And let me end by saying Canada and India continue to collaborate through the G20 and OECD, which is the best for developing mutual transfer of technology and policies like around procurement.
Okay. As they say, adversity also brings with it new opportunities. What are the priority or focus areas for Infrastructure Canada moving forward, both within Canada and in terms of overseas collaborations?
So in terms of within Canada, to mention, the government of Canada is really an informed investor of using our spending power in helping provinces like Alberta and Ontario who are here to achieve our shared objectives. And let me just echo, there's a lot of alignment between the federal government and the provincial governments in meeting our infrastructure deficit. And I think the government of Canada is shifting more towards what are the key needs of communities, and there's been a big focus on transit, also now more so on the generation and distribution transmission of clean power, moving towards a cleaner net zero economy. Those are two really big priorities. But we also think about not just big projects, but small community projects and the inclusiveness of the infrastructure agenda so everyone can participate. And then internationally, we're going to continue to encourage other countries like India to develop those stable long-term policy frameworks to really attract and retain that kind of investment. And I think even beyond the programs India's put in place as of late, providing that longer-term stable framework is what really is going to attract more private investment from Canada. And in Canada, we should do the same to attract Indian investment in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. So that concludes our first session. I would request all the speakers for the first session to stay back with us if they can, while we now move to the second session. So our next speaker is Terry Wallace. Nagasrat, if you can bring up his introduction slide. So Terry Wallace is the president of Lea Consulting Limited, and he manages operations of the Lea Group in Canada. Over the past 30 plus years, Terry has worked in the fields of transportation planning and traffic engineering, environmental assessment, civil design, and construction for projects, including transportation infrastructure and land development, from project planning stages until completion. Terry is also involved in international projects, including those in India, overseeing Canadian participation and providing project input based on his experience. Terry has been involved in projects requiring extensive transportation planning, traffic operations engineering, functional and detailed design for EA studies, civil and municipal engineering design, official plan reviews, secondary plans, corridor traffic impact studies, major utility relocations, and feasibility and cost benefit studies. He has been extensively involved in the civil design aspect of major rail and transit infrastructure projects, including conceptual design, planning, and public consultation, environmental assessments, detailed design of road and transit infrastructure. He has been actively involved in guiding GEA's activities in India. So over to you, Eric.
Thank you very much, Vipal, and good afternoon and good evening or good morning to the participants here, depending where you are. I'll just try to share my screen here. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Yes, yep.
So I'll talk about the Lea Group somewhat, and we're a consulting engineering firm. So we provide professional services in engineering, and I'll try to focus my comments on the benefits of a Canadian company working in India, and what happens in return. And also to talk about how Canada and India can work together in infrastructure, technology transfer, and things like that. So, I mean, just to give everybody an idea, the Lea Group, who we are. So we started as a Canadian consulting engineering firm. So we had Canadian offices in the beginning, and we really just worked in the Canadian market. And then one day we decided we wanted to do international work, and we won a project in India quite a few years ago. We opened an office, hired staff there, and a few years later we are 2,000 plus employees working across the Eastern Hemisphere, with work that's largely being administered through an office in New Delhi. And our footprint today is really across the globe, in Canada and in many other countries. So perhaps coming back, I'm seeing some faces on my screen. Is it blocking the presentation on your, for what you folks are seeing?
No,
No,
we can see the
we
presentation.
can see it perfectly fine.
Oh, okay, good. So perhaps using our company as an example, as a private business, what Canada and India have in common. Both countries are really building infrastructure rapidly. The largest cities are growing very fast. So when we looked at India, our focus was civil engineering, especially for roads and rail and transit, and some services in transportation planning. We initially needed to find a local partner, and we did that. We bid on some projects. And as we got to know the lay of the land and the environment, made contacts and friends in India, we could expand and grow and bid on more projects and really grow a business. And what we looked to do was to continue to offer up new innovations and technologies. And the really important thing was how we add value to our clients that we are working for. Smart cities was one example in India where there was a great opportunity for us to get involved and provide some input from Canada on that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. As a private business, again, if you ask me how governments could help private businesses, I've been to a few forums and trade missions from Canada to India, which were great opportunities and great experiences for private businesses to see what's going on there, and really to meet players and get to know other firms that we can work with. Canadian Trade Commission also is a great partner for private businesses to help us work in any other country. Emphasizing and demonstrating successes of private businesses working between Canada and India, I think that would be a great opportunity for the governments to promote working between Canada and India. Take our example of our company, which is, I think, hugely successful working in Canada and India, and IBI Group, Deepak will be talking about their successes in India, I'm sure, as well after me. But just demonstrating how businesses can benefit and how the flow goes each way once those benefits and connections are realized. Emphasis on international engineering students. Governments could probably provide greater emphasis on that. We, for example, we decided to start a work term scholarship at a Canadian university quite recently. And rather than having a work placement of that Canadian student in Canada, we decided we're going to have them placed in an international location, most likely in India. And the reaction at the university was overwhelming there. We had a lot of interest. Unfortunately, the pandemic has really put a hold on that, but we're waiting for the pandemic to finish so that we can get back on track with that program. Talking a little bit about transferring skills and technology. So for us, obviously a small investment in India led to a very large return. As a corporation, we benefit not only from the additional revenue and profits that come through the growth in the company by having overseas operations, but from the large pool of employee resources in India, which is far beyond what Canada can offer. And as I showed from our New Delhi office location, we're really managing work throughout the Eastern Hemisphere. So really at the beginning of our initiative, the Canadian operation supported the growth and startup in India. Now it's a two-way street, and the India operation supporting Canada and Canada supporting India, and it's going back and forth. Some examples of that, like our Lea India office supports Canada in things like travel demand modeling, which is a high-tech engineering application, CAD and BIM support. Lea Canada supports Lea India in ITS and smart city planning and other elements. And we're having some of our subway design engineers travel to India to have conversations with contractors and government officials there. Just for example, on travel demand modeling, our Canadian office first introduced it to our India office a few years ago. The software is actually developed in Montreal, and the application is widely used through North America. But having introduced it on a few projects, our Lea India office now takes the lead on that application for any of our projects, including those in Canada. And we in Canada, we go to them for that. Little bit on the smart city projects where we were working on two of them in India. A lot of technology introduced into the smart city projects, video crime monitoring and waste to energy applications, smart meters for water management and energy management, smart parking features, telemedicine. These are examples of some of the applications that are being applied in the smart city planning. Other ways Canada and India could work together in infrastructure. I know P3 was mentioned, and some of the speakers have talked about the P3 model in Canada and India. I know in Canada, the P3 model is evolving and improving. Alliance models and IPD models are now becoming very popular in infrastructure. And the goal of these refined models are really to reduce costs and have all the parties benefit from reducing cost and limiting, liabilities to make it more attractive for the private sector to invest in this. There are bodies who provide information and have expertise in Canada, and perhaps something that governments could do is bring along these organizations to work on international P3s and bring their expertise with them. And I think that's a two-way street as well, because India has been doing a lot of P3 work in the past. And I'm sure both countries could benefit from the experiences and the expertise that's there. Anyways, that's just a very short introduction of our firm. And I think we have enjoyed a huge success being a Canadian company working in India. I know everybody involved in our company is very proud of what we have achieved. We're an employee-owned company, so we have shareholders in India and Canada who have ownership in the firm. And it's in our view, it's really a great model for a business. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Wallace, for that, for the wonderful presentation. And to also know that Lea is very happy to be in India. We hope you continue to stay engaged and grow your operations further in India as well. So let us move now to our next speaker, Deepak Darda. Deepak is a Global Director for Innovation for IBI Group. As the head of IBI Group's Office of Innovation, Deepak is driving IBI's transformational pivot to a technology-driven design firm through focused efforts, catalyzing core growth, transforming IBI's business models, exploring future tech disruptions in the industry, and fostering innovation. Deepak also leads IBI's Smart City Sandbox initiative, a unique partnership between public and private sector industry leaders whose goal, together with the startup ecosystem, is to bring innovative new technology solutions to urban environments. Prior to becoming a Global Director of Innovation, Deepak built IBI Group's presence in India from the ground up into the significant contributor to the firm's international operations that it is today. Deepak is an alum of the Harvard Business School and holds a master's degree from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, and a bachelor's degree from IIT Bombay. So over to you, Deepak.
Thank you, Vipulji. I think my previous speakers gave me a great background to really talk about this. I think a lot of the stuff was already covered by the Honorable High Commissioner, as well as I think Rahul gave a pretty good overview about what's happening in India. So, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I think this slide sort of captures the growth that is there in India. I think it's very clear India today is a 3 trillion economy. Like by 2030, it will be about a 10 trillion economy. It houses 14% of the world population. The current infrastructure plan is around 1.5 trillion over the next 5 years. In the urban space, India is going to invest around 255 billion, and in transportation around 500 billion over the next 5 years. So again, I think there is nothing new that I can say here other than what Rahul actually presented in much more detail in terms of what are the opportunities on the Indian economy and everything. But what I thought that given my background, it would be worthwhile for me to talk a little bit about India-Canada success stories. And again, as Vipulji mentioned, in my background, like I had the opportunity to really build IBI operations from scratch in India, which is around a 200 people operations now. And then from there, now I have moved to Canada to take up the global innovations role. So I sort of had that perspective of running and building a business in India and how Canada leveraged that, and now how we are leveraging India to basically bring that back into Canada. So wanted to share maybe just 4 quick examples in terms of things that we have done where there has been an impact from Canada into India and now vice versa. So very briefly, IBI, we are a integrated practice of intelligence buildings and infrastructure. So we design buildings, we design infrastructure, and we look into technology within buildings and infrastructure. So that's in a quick summary about IBI. So let me just get into the 4 success stories that I really wanted to talk about. The first one was when we entered India, as was also mentioned by Rahul in the presentation. India had this big program, or still is having the big program about national highways, and projects were coming online. And at that time, the government was really looking into technology for tolling. And it was very quickly realized that given the amount of traffic that is there in India, we really need to look into electronic tolling. And given the scale of India, everyone was actually looking into getting the technology in. So at that point, the government had appointed Mr. Nandan Nelkani to sort of head this committee and sort of drive and suggest which technology should be actually chosen for India as a way forward. And luckily for us, like because of the leverage that we had in Canada, where we were working on some of the cutting edge technology on tolling here, like we were able to get all the inputs in terms of what would be the right things for India. And we were happy to contribute to this committee to select RFID technology, which is 18,006C, and that is what has been adopted. So again, it was a small intervention, but we were able to do it because of the expertise that we had developed here, and we were able to quickly bring it to India, which I think now has a very national impact. And this is the impact of the technology choice. India now has a fast tax program, which I think is the biggest now in the world. It's hosted by about 35 banks. It covers around 700 plus plazas in India. Number of vehicles passing every month through this tag program is over 200 million, and it's collecting like 31.77 billion rupees every month. So huge impact. And again, I think from Canada have contributed in one way from the Kennedy for the choice of technology, but now what we can really learn from India is how really you can implement it and scale it. I think it is fabulous to see how India has implemented this in the last 6 to 7 years, and now where 80 or 90% of actual collection is now happening through the ATC, where I don't think there is anywhere in the world where that much penetration of ATC has happened. Going on to my second example, this is transforming India in the areas of sustainable transportation. So again, India had this program of how do we make our cities more adopt sustainable means in terms of transportation. So it was looking in non-motorized transportation, public bike sharing scheme, or transit-oriented development. So that is what something India had thought about, and how do we really implement it. And again, given our expertise here in Canada, we were able to quickly leverage that team and bring those people as team leaders within our team. And I think picture says 1,000 words. Like you can see that a mix of our Canadian colleagues and my team in India, where we collaborated together to really redefine this paradigm in India. And like in the words of my own colleagues, like the leads, they basically said this project gives us an immense opportunity as well as shivers, because the work that we are going to do is going to impact about 1 billion people. So again, just that expertise, but the impact that it can create is huge. And I'm happy to say that we delivered this framework for the country. These are available as guidance document by the Ministry of Urban Development, and very happy to actually launch it. And then we work with different cities to actually get some of these actually implemented on the ground. Coming to the third example, like I think many of you might be aware that India has had this program of 100 smart cities. And given our strength in India and given our expertise in Canada, we were able to bring all that together. And then we actually partnered with City of Bhubaneswar to actually submit their proposal for the smart city. And Bhubaneswar was selected as the #1 city in the 100 Smart Cities Challenge. It was based on the holistic approach that was put together in terms of how infrastructure should be built up, how technology should come in, and how we are going to solve the problem of the citizens. So again, the interdisciplinary nature of IBI and our global expertise, we were able to actually make it happen. And then we sort of continued with Bhubaneswar to actually now realizing this entire thing in Bhubaneswar, where we are sort of looking into the entire technology footprint for the city in terms of different IT systems, city services, like revamping like the traffic systems, etc., and implementing an integrated intelligent city operation system, right? That is what we sort of are now helping the city to execute that. We have also been helping the city to really revamp their infrastructure and change the city landscape, change the placemaking, or change the urban fabric of the city. Part of that, we have also implemented this large control room, which sort of brings everything together. This is probably the largest control room, like at a city level in India, which sort of looks into all the different services coming together. And it became one of the core centers for all the cyclone mitigation, all the support that was being provided by the city, as well as in the current ongoing pandemic. And again, from a success story perspective, like again, we have held hands of Bhubaneswar throughout the journey, where we have helped them in terms of building the basics, setting their benchmark, facelifting the Bhubaneswar, really revamping what Bhubaneswar is about, their profile in the country, and like really reimagining their assets. So again, as a result, today Bhubaneswar is considered to be one of the most livable cities in India. It's first in the citizen perception survey, and it's the second in the most livable cities in India in less than a million population. So again, a huge impact because of the expertise that we were able to bring there. Needless to say, like this, the city and all these projects have won many awards internationally as well as within India. So that's essentially my third example. The fourth one, again, is coming back to Rahul's point about huge opportunities in India. So India has some of these ambitious programs like the BharatNet. BharatNet is the ambitious program of really bringing rural broadband to like around 2.5 lakh communities within India. So it's powering the 2.5 lakh communities and providing them up to 25 megawatt Mbps of data coverage. And again, we are really proud that we are associated with this project. We are doing around 20,000 communities out of the 25 lakh communities that are there. So we are there in Chhattisgarh. We are working in Raipur. We recently got things in Andhra Pradesh. So again, a huge opportunity. And again, all that was possible because of the resources and experience that we had. So we had worked previously on Alberta SuperNet, where we actually had looked into the entire design and implementation of Alberta SuperNet. We have been working in the York region here in terms of the telecom network, and SWIFT in terms of the business plan. So again, bringing that expertise from here into Canada, into India, sort of helped us to get those projects. And also we brought the experts from here and took them to India to actually help us in this new area that we launched our expertise. So overall, I think that Indian economy definitely offers great opportunities. I think my examples would have shown that it's not just opportunities. Companies from Canada can actually leverage the opportunities and convert them big and really contribute in a meaningful manner. I think India, Canada, like they can be great partners. As I said, in some areas, Canada can lead, but there is a lot of learning that then happens in India that you can actually bring it back to Canada or other parts of the world. And the third area, which really is my passion, and this is my role now in IBI, is about the tech ecosystems. Canada has great tech ecosystems. The Waterloo, Toronto corridor has huge startup ecosystem. India has a huge tech ecosystems, and that's something that I think we want to leverage. We want to bring stuff from India to here and from here to India. So that's my quick remarks as far as the India story is concerned.
Thank you. That was a fantastic presentation, Deepak. And we feel like moving back to Bhubaneswar. So thank you for doing what you are doing in India. And I believe Deepak has another meeting in about 5 minutes. So let me ask him his 2 quick questions, and then I will move to the next speaker, Ahmed Mubashir from AIMCO. Ahmed ji, with your apologies, I will ask 2 quick questions to Deepak first. So the first one is inherently innovation means something new, something out of the box and futuristic, while the governments and their bureaucracies are generally associated with slower decision making and being averse to out of the box innovative ideas. So as a global director of innovation for IBI Group, how do you match innovation to governments, and where do you see India, especially in becoming more future ready?
I think my experience has been that India has been leapfrogging. Like some of the examples where I have actually myself been involved. As an example, the first example that I gave on ETC, it took Europe about 20 years to figure out the technology that has to be implemented into Europe. And in India, we chose the RFID technology, which was just like 2 years, like it was not completely proven, but India was willing to take the risk to pick that technology, given the cost effectiveness from an Indian environment perspective, the market perspective, the penetration it could create, and actually jump into it, believe in it, and sort of accelerate that, right? So that's an example of innovation in my mind, where a technology was not proven for like 10, 15, 20 years. It was 2 years or something into it. And then we made it as a national standard and sort of took it forward. And examples like smart cities that are happening, I think those are things where it offers huge opportunities. Yes, I think government cannot focus on like small elements, but like I think it is then up to companies like us how we fit some of those innovative things as a part of the projects or as a part of execution.
Sure. IBI Group does projects in Israel, in Canada, in USA, UK, Oman, UAE, and other countries. Do you see a similar global trends and priorities emerging globally, or each market is still unique and different in terms of where it wants to be 10 or 20 years from now?
I think each market is unique. In my mind, a company has to be global. Like they have to be global, where they have that expertise, but they need to understand local. Like you cannot apply a global solution just locally. It has to be really customized to that area or that country. And every country has its own nuances, the business nuances, how you do business, what are the things that would work, what would not work. So again, we always look at global. We look at how to bring the global expertise, but make it local. And that's our mantra.
Sure. Thank you for that, Deepak ji, and apologies for going a little bit over time. But I think it was nice to hear from you. So Amarjot, I think he is right now in California. Are you still there, Amarjot, or? Do you want to come back a bit later?
No, I'm here.
Okay, sure. So Ahmed, sorry once again, just a quick couple of minutes for Amarjot Sandhu. Nagasarat, see if you can bring up his profile quickly. A little bit of improvisation in the sequencing. This is the agenda, not this one. Okay, so Amarjot Sandhu is an MPP for Brampton West. He arrived in Canada in 2008 as an international student and went to George Brown College in Toronto. He later became a realtor with Royal LePage in Brampton. Amarjot Sandhu is the member of the provincial parliament for the riding of Brampton West, and he is a parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Infrastructure, Government of Ontario. He is also a member of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts and a member of the Standing Committee on General Government. He is the first international student to be elected as a representative to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, and he currently resides in his riding of Brampton West with his wife and his 2 kids. So Mr. Sandhu is right now joining us from the car. So over to you, Mr. Sandhu, and then after this, we have 2 more final speakers, Mr. Ahmed Mubashir from AIMCO and Mr. Prasad Gadkari from NIIF India. Those are the last 2 speakers. So over to you, Mr. Sandhu.
Thank you so much, Vipulji. First of all, my apologies. As I told you that I'm on road, so I'll be not able to turn on my camera right now. But I'm very happy to be here with my good friend, Honorable Prasad Panda ji, Minister of Infrastructure, Government of Alberta, Honorable His Excellency Anshuman Gaur ji, Acting High Commissioner of India to Canada, Rahul Agarwal, Vice President in West Canada, Glenn Campbell, Assistant Deputy Minister, Investment Partnerships and Investment, Infrastructure in Canada, and all of the other great speakers participating here today. It's great to have the opportunity to share updates on Ontario's exciting and growing infrastructure projects. I will speak to our experience and the challenges and how we can continue to build throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. I will speak to the important relationships that help support these critical infrastructure projects and how we are working together with other regions and countries such as India to make it through similar challenges. Our government has been working tirelessly to close the infrastructure gap in every corner of our province. The pandemic has presented us with some unique challenges, but Ontario has never. We recognize the urgency and the situation called for Ontarians. This is top priority because of what it means for people's quality of life and providing them with the supports and services they need, such as the delivery of vaccines and PPEs, which have been vital in navigating.
Okay, we are having some audio issues, Amarjot.
Throughout the pandemic. For other regions and countries, such as India. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, go ahead actually. From time to time,
Can you hear me?
Yes, for now, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ontario is proud that during such a difficult time, we were able to support other regions and countries such as India by providing important health supplies to help the country manage ongoing outbreaks using crucial medical equipment. Ontario and India benefit from robust government to government, and both sides continue to grow bilateral trade and investment responsible for thousands of jobs in both jurisdictions and close cooperation in education, tourism, and research. Let me share an important statistic. More than 100 Ontario-based companies have a presence in India, and more than 60 Indian companies across all sectors have operations and investments in Ontario. This is why the Indo-Pacific region is a priority region for Ontario, as the province navigates the pandemic and seeks to identify new trade partners in Asia to help bolster the resiliency of supply chains to support the growth of Ontario's small and medium-sized enterprises. India's economy offers tremendous opportunities for Ontario companies in sectors such as transportation, infrastructure, life sciences, clean energy technology, and renewable energy, as well as in traditional sectors such as infrastructure development and defense and security. As we work to develop partnerships between Ontario, India, and the Indo-Pacific region, we continue to plan for inbound to quickly structure across the province. Our investments and efforts are also creating good jobs and spurring economic growth, which is critical for our communities to not only recover from the pandemic, but also to thrive in the years to come. In fact, Ontario's planned infrastructure investments over the next decade total more than $148 billion. This includes investment in critical infrastructure like healthcare, long-term care, education, transit, roads, bridges, courthouses, and other types of public facilities. Planned public-private partnership P3 projects include, for example, a crucial transit project such as the Ontario Line, a 15.6-kilometer standalone rapid transit line. And the Gaur rail expansion, which will transform the transportation network in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area over the next decade. They also include hospital builds and renovations, such as the construction of the new Mackenzie's Health Cardiology Vaughan Hospital. We're building and upgrading roads and bridges, such as the construction of new twin bridge north of the existing Credit River Bridge and rehabilitation of the existing Credit River Bridge, including widening the QEW and replacement of the Mississauga Road overpass. The work on projects completed through the P3 model is done with the support and assistance of our Crown Agency, Infrastructure Ontario. Since IO was established, it has brought over 130 major P3 projects to market by working with the private sector. The P3 market update, a list of public projects in the pre-procurement and procurement stages that Ontario is investing in currently includes 38 major P3 projects, totaled an estimated 60 billion in contract value. Regionally and locally, we have continued to forge ahead, supporting 424 eligible communities in rural northern areas across the province throughout the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, also known as OSIF. Last month, through our fall economic statement, we committed an additional 1 billion to OSIF over the next 5 years, which works out to an additional 200 million each year to build and repair roads, bridges, water and wastewater infrastructure in communities across the province. And we're investing up to 10.2 billion of federal, provincial, and partner funding through the Investing in Canada infrastructure program. This program supports infrastructure projects through 5 streams, including rural and northern, transit, community, culture and recreation, green and COVID-19 resilience infrastructure. Throughout infrastructure programs like OSIF and ICIF, we're getting shovels into the ground faster than ever before on hundreds of projects in Ontario. Reliable internet and cellular access help people stay in touch with friends and family during these critical times, access public services like healthcare and education, run businesses, work from anywhere in the province, create jobs, and enhance economic growth. By investing in our infrastructure, we're investing in our economic future, enhancing our requirements. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I look forward to more opportunities for Ontario and India to work together to build a strong Ontario for today and for generations to come.
Thank you, Amarjot. Yeah, I will just ask you one quick question, although you have already addressed part of it already. Ontario is very actively engaged with India, as you just mentioned, in terms of the physical and virtual trade missions, as well as people-to-people ties. In terms of the infrastructure sector specifically, where is Ontario-India engagement right now, which you already partly addressed, and what can be done or is being done to increase that engagement?
Very good question, Ripalji. You know, as I mentioned in my speech, that Ontario and India benefit from robust government-to-government engagement, growing bilateral trade and investment responsible for thousands of jobs in both jurisdictions, and close cooperation in education, tourism, and research. And India was the world's largest, 5th largest economy in 2019, making it priority market for Ontario. Sectors in India identified as having key opportunities for Ontario companies that include advanced security, agriculture, automotive, healthcare, construction infrastructure, environmental infrastructure, and wastewater, power, and telecommunications. And one of the initiatives, as Anshuman Gaur he was mentioning, you know, initiatives such as the Gati Shakti Master Plan, the Smart Cities Mission, and others in India present interesting opportunities for Ontario companies specializing in professional services, big data, logistics, and project delivery. So our Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, currently, as I said, they lead virtual trade missions to help build and strengthen important trade relationships and reestablish disrupted supply chains for priority sectors. Delegations to key industry events such as the upcoming Convergence ICT conference in March and the Municipalika trade show in November next year would see that interior infrastructure companies participate in targeted meetings around potential opportunities under India's Gati Shakti master plan, the National Infrastructure Pipeline, and the Smart Cities mission. And our ministers, definitely COVID has slowed down the great, progress India and Ontario made in the last couple of years. Our two ministers of economic development and trade, they led a trade mission, very successful trade mission, in fact, to India, Vic Delhi and Minister Todd Smith. And on behalf of the government of Ontario, I would say that we'll continue to strengthen the cultural and economic ties between the two countries in the coming years.
Thank you, Amarjot ji. Thank you for joining us. Drive safe, and we'll connect again soon.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so let us now move to our next speaker, Mr. Ahmed Mubashir. After this, we'll ask a couple of questions to Ahmed, and then 2 questions for Terry Wallace, and then the last presentation will be from Prasad Gadkari. So Nagasarat, if you can bring up the slide for Ahmed. Ahmed Mubashir is a director in the Infrastructure and Renewable Resources Group and heads the infrastructure investing in Europe and Asia for Alberta Investment Management Corporation, or AIMCO. Ahmed joined AIMCO in a direct investment role in 2011 and brings a wealth of experience in the energy and finance sectors. Ahmed has led transactions in the midstream, utilities, and renewable energy sectors and serves on multiple investee company boards. He also represents AIMCO on the advisory committee for the G7 Investor Leadership Network. Mr. Ahmed holds an MBA from the University of Alberta and a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from McGill University. Ahmed's work experience prior to joining AIMCO includes working as a field engineer at Schlumberger and short stints in investment banking and financial advisory at Morgan Stanley and Deloitte, respectively. He is a registered professional engineer, non-practicing, with the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Alberta, and is a CFA charter holder. So over to you, Mr. Mubashir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whipple. I appreciate I may be the second last speaker over here and running behind schedule. So I'll try to make my comments brief. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. Just, I guess, a high level about myself and the company that I represent today. So as you mentioned, I'm a director in the Infrastructure and Renewable Resources Group. I head infrastructure investing for Asia and Europe out of our London office. I work for Alberta Investment Management Corporation. So we are an institutional investor based in Alberta, and we invest on behalf of government sector pension plans, endowment funds, and other especially government funds. We have roughly about 150 billion of assets under management. A portion of that, which is roughly about 12 billion, sits in the infrastructure group, and I am a director in that group. When it comes to our style of investing, it's indirect investing, which essentially means that we look to invest directly into assets without really going through a middleman or a fund in most circumstances. Our, I would say, journey into India is sort of in nascent phases right now. And as you asked, a lot of speakers have already talked about it, so I'm not going to go into the details, but there is definitely lots to like about the India story. The Prime Minister vision, of self-reliance for India and having infrastructure as a core pillar to be able to get there, makes a lot of sense. The economy, it's one of the largest in the world. It's one of the fastest growing economies. You have a population size, which is roughly 1.4 billion, and vast majority of them are young, educated. When you look at the political and legal systems, definitely speak well with what we are used to in Canada, and the medium of instruction and communication is something that we are very well versed with. So there are lots of reasons for investors to go in on a macro level into India, and there are enough evidence of a lot of our peers doing that. If you look at, OMERS, Ontario Teachers, PSP, CPP, CDPQ, all of us have heavily invested in India and will perhaps continue to do so. Our journey into India, again, is on a direct investing basis is quite new. Earlier this year, we invested in a renewables investing platform called Virescent. And, the Honorable High Commissioner also mentioned some of the changes that have come about. And this is sort of a testament to that. So Virescent was going to be the first renewable InvIT that was created. And the InvIT structure, with its tax efficiencies and other benefits for investors, is one of the ways in which India has made investing in infrastructure easier. I mean, we obviously have InvITs in the telecom space, the road space, the transmission space, and of course now we also have InvITs in the renewable sector. Perhaps just concentrating a little bit more, focusing on the renewable sector, and the reason why we see a lot of promise in it is when you think about India and the rate at which it's growing at, and you look at what the energy demands for India would be in the future, coupled with the fact that the government has plans to take the current installed capacity of about 170 gigawatts of renewables to 450 by 2030, that only means there's going to be a lot of tailwinds for this sector. And AIMCO, on behalf of its clients, want to be able to participate in these in the sector, to be able to make good risk-adjusted returns for our clients. For us, getting into Virescent is perhaps a first step, of getting more experience in investing in India. But I can definitely say that we are looking forward to this journey of further building our experience and doing more in India.
Okay, so thank you for that, Mr. Mubashir. So I have a couple of questions for you, and then I will go to Terry. As I mentioned earlier, AIMCO, as you mentioned, has over $150 billion of assets under management. Actually, you have already partly answered this question. How much of that is in India, actually? And why did you choose India? And where do you see AIMCO in the emerging India story going forward?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that AIMCO is, as you can imagine, the 150. I don't have the split of how much exposure we would have to India, because infrastructure is a very small component of the 150 billion of assets that we manage on behalf of our clients. I think on the infrastructure side, I can answer that, we have an increasing exposure to India. While we're starting small at the moment, but we do feel that we have a lot of runway to build on that. I would say when it comes to areas that we want to focus on, it is things like renewables, as I mentioned, and the transmission development that would be required to support the renewable proliferation within India. That is a sector that we are very much interested in. A second sector that we're also keeping a keen eye on is the transport sector, and we're looking to see how we could play that in the future.
Okay. When you invest in a private company, people these days also look at their ESG record, environment, social governance. I think that is also an area of priority or focus for AIMCO as well. So does the same criteria apply to nations also? Because a sector like infrastructure does impact all three: environment, social, and governance.
Absolutely. I think, that's the one thing that we are very proud of is our ESG track record. Actually, we have a dedicated group within AIMCO, which is called Responsible Investments. And we liaise with our Responsible Investments group on every investment that we do. If I can say that, when it comes to ESG benchmarking in the infrastructure space, AIMCO, along with some of our peers, were the founding members of GRESB Infrastructure, again, which benchmarks infrastructure funds and firms on their ESG efforts. So we've definitely been on the forefront on the ESG side. I can tell you that we take our ESG philosophy and also implement it across all of our investee companies, and where we have the influence, definitely look to influence them to incorporate all the best practices that we've learned through our ESG and responsible investing experience that we have across the globe, across various different asset classes. And we've successfully been able to do that, and we'll continue to do that wherever we invest.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mubashir. Thank you for joining us today and also staying with us till now. We once again look forward to connecting with you soon. And also, as I mentioned earlier, to be inviting you to in-person roundtables that we will be hosting soon. So thank you for the same.
Thank you.
Now, I still have two questions to ask to Terry before we can go to our final presentation today from Prasad Gadkari of NIIF. So Terry, I think you have already addressed my first question, but I will still ask anyway. If you can tell us about Lea International's experiences in India. I mean, you have done projects in India, but if you can tell us how that experience has been and about your plans going forward in India.
Yeah, well, the experience has been tremendously great. I think growing from 4 people on one project 20 years ago to 2,000 people working in India today would suggest that it's been a great experience for us. We want to be there, and it's worked out really well. When companies grow like this in new regions, those entities in the new regions take on their own way of doing things, and become less and less reliant on, say, the initial initiator like Canada. So one of the benefits we're seeing is that our operations in India are becoming more and more self-sufficient. And largely the work we do for the national highways or India railways, largely being managed by people in our New Delhi office. So we're at the point now where just whenever some expertise is needed from Canada, we provide it.
Wonderful. And your company also has done projects in more than 50 countries, if I am not wrong. Where does India rank in terms of planning, executing these projects, and the ease of doing it in comparison to some of the other markets? And where do you think India can improve to become a more attractive investment and manufacturing destination?
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to answer that question for our firm. We have a president of international operations who would be much better, and unfortunately he could not attend today. The countries we venture into, a lot of them, especially when we go for the first time, I'm sure there are always challenges in setting up the projects and dealing with the currencies that the project is done in. So I think having worked in India for much longer than these other countries, the ease of work in India is obviously easier for the company to deal with. I think every country has its unique challenges, both traveling and living conditions and the governments to deal with. I mean, most of our work is through international lending agencies that we work with on overseas projects. You know, I think dealing with those types of contracts is pretty customary or standard for us now. World Bank and African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank. So I can't really answer the question on where it's more difficult to work in, but I think we're continuing to work internationally, and it certainly hasn't reached a point where we're getting dissatisfied with working in any particular country.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. That's fine. We do understand. So we'll ask that question to John next time. Next time we can grab hold of him. So thank you for joining again today, Mr. Wallace. Now we have the final presentation from NIIF India. I think that they have a lot of good information as well that you may want to see. So Nagasrat, if you can bring up the introduction for Prasad. This is our final speaker, final presentation for today. Although it has gone way over time, but I think it was all well worth it for all what we have heard today. So Prasad Gadkari is the Executive Director and Chief Strategy Officer for National Investment and Infrastructure Fund for NIIF in India. He has got over 2 decades of experience in areas of private equity, principal investments, joint ventures, project finance, and corporate and policy advisory. He is currently the Chief Strategy Officer at NIIF and is responsible for the strategic initiatives and policy advisory function. Prior to joining NIIF in 2017, Prasad was the Managing Director at TVS Capital, based in Mumbai, and prior to TVS, he was a partner with IDFC Private Equity, focused on investments in core infrastructure and social sectors. Over his almost decade-long stint with IDFC PE, he handled several important deals, including India's first infrastructure holding company, an oncology care chain, largest airport privatization deal, a water management business, and India's first student living solutions company. Prasad has also worked with General Electric, where he was responsible for infrastructure investing and joint ventures in South Asia, Middle East, and North Africa region. Prior to GE, Prasad was with IDFC Limited in their project finance group, where he handled some of the earliest project financing transactions in the country. He was also a key member of the team that provided policy level inputs to the government of India for their initial privatization transactions. Prasad started his career in 1996 with Larsen & Toubro's infrastructure finance business, just around the time India started experimenting with infrastructure privatization. So it's relatively late. I think it's almost 11:30 at night for you in India. Prasad, apologies for holding you back for so long. But I am sure you might have enjoyed the presentations and the discussions that we had so far. So looking forward to another informative presentation from you. Over to you.
Thank you, Vipulji, and good evening to all of you. I hope I am audible.
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Yes, I think it's, thank you for inviting us, and it's been fascinating to listen to everybody. Right from the High Commissioner, Mr. Anshuman Gaurji, Rahul's again made obviously a very punchy presentation on what is happening in India, and he's obviously lightened my work. A lot of what I would have spoken about, he's already covered. It was great to hear Mr. Panda ji from an Alberta perspective, and generally from all the speakers to get a sense of what's actually happening in Canada also. Obviously, we are so India focused and we do track what's happening globally, but some of the insights were very useful. I'm going to share my screen, and frankly, I have four points I wanted to make. And as I said, some of it has already been covered, so I'm not going to spend too much time on what's already spoken. Let me know if you can see my screen. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay. So and I'm Vipulji, hopefully I'll help make up for the time for you to and run through this quickly.
Sure.
I think the programs we have already heard. There are 2 large programs, so I'm not going to go into that. I think the only point I want to make on this slide is 2 large and massive programs, right? So 1.6 trillion, and I heard some of the speakers, and I know investors are interested in operating assets, especially pension funds and financial investors. But I also heard some of the speakers talk about development assets and greenfield, and India clearly offers both these opportunities in abundance. I'm not going to go into the detail. The other part of this slide is really, again, some of it was spoken about, so the tax benefits which the government has accorded, and I think as Mr. Gaur made the point, a lot of it was in interaction with the Canadian pension funds, and I think the government has been extremely responsive and proactive to tailor the tax benefits so that they can attract the global investors. But I think that's not the full story. The full story is across bunch of things. The government, in fact, over the last 4 or 5 years, has been tweaking, changing policies, bringing new things, and making life easier. Making and ease of doing business. It's no longer just another word. There's specific things, whether it's the single window clearance system which is being put in place, whether there are dedicated SPOCs which have been put in finance ministry for each investor, and some of it we have been intimately involved with, so we are exactly aware of the details. So every investor actually has been mapped to a senior official in the Ministry of Finance who they can directly reach out to so as to navigate the system, resolve its queries. So there are a bunch of measures, I think, which the government has done and which I thought I would want to highlight. The second point I wanted to make was, again, a little bit it was touched upon in the previous presentations, but I wanted to just re-emphasize what the government has done is they have actually tailored products and structures, whether it's project structures, whether it's investment products. I think the government has been in a listening mode, and they have realized that between construction contractors, infrastructure developers, pension funds, sovereign funds, private equity funds, each one of them, although they may be bringing capital in, they have different horizons, different risk return spectrums they work on, different styles of investing. And therefore, what the government has done is actually shape and tweak policies and structures so that you have something which is tailor-made for every category of investors. And I'll give just 2 examples. In the highway sector, we talked of BOT and we talked of challenges. And what the government then did, they came up with these 2 formats. One is the hybrid annuity, which is essentially geared towards contractors who can take construction risk but don't want to take market risk, traffic risk, and all of that. And that's a great model which works for them. On the other end of the spectrum, they came up with this scheme called toll operate transfer, which is called TOT scheme, which takes away the construction risk, but gives you the market risk, the financing risk. So first kind of projects is attracting contractors and people who can provide development capital. And the last category is attracting pension funds, infrastructure funds. Then they have these infrastructure investment trusts, the INVITs, which I think several people refer to. That is really geared towards people like, and I think AIMCO has invested is what they said, people who are interested, but who don't want to fully jump into the sector or don't want to become very active. It's great product for people who want to earn a yield, who want to get to know the sector in a little more passive way. So, so I think this is again, second point I wanted to highlight, and I don't want to go into every other point, but basically they have created these product and structures. And on the right side of the slide, you can see, I've just listed, these are all global investors, so, obviously you can recognize several of the Canadian names, whether it's CPPIB, Ontario Teachers, you have Brookfield, you have CDPQ, but also we have other people from other markets. We have the KKRs of the world, you have Cube Highways, then you have the Singaporeans with the Port of Singapore Authority, GIC, which is the Sovereign Fund of Singapore, We have the Middle Eastern investors, whether it's ADIA, whether it's Qatar investments. So across the global, you have Zurich airports, which is doing a greenfield airport. So each of these products actually have attracted the best and largest of the global investors. I think that was the second point I wanted to really highlight. And then I wanted to quickly lay before you amongst various products and things which have got created. One amongst them is again my company, which is the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund. We are practically a 4 or 5 year old animal, relatively new, and we are a category what is called a sovereign linked fund. We are not a pure sovereign wealth fund, and we are not a pure play private equity fund. We are something in between, and some people refer to us as a sovereign linked fund. Today, perhaps we are the largest infrastructure focused kind of private equity funds in the Indian market. And we invest through 3 different strategies. We have actually created 3 different funds under the NIIF umbrella. The first fund is a pure infrastructure fund. It's about $2.3 billion in size, and through which we have been doing core infrastructure assets. And the reason I'm highlighting this to you is for some of you who would want to invest in India in a financing vehicle, NIIF provides you that. But also if you want to do joint ventures or want to take up projects, each one of what we have done is under each of my funds, we have a dozen entities we have created, and that's the below box. So under my infrastructure fund, we have actually 4 different companies which we have created. One is a ports and logistics joint venture. It's a joint venture with Dubai Ports. We have a renewable company. It's a joint venture with CDC of UK. That's about 3 gigawatts. Our logistics venture is the #2 logistics company in the country. We have a company which is doing smart metering projects on power distribution. That's a joint venture with a public sector company called ESL. We own a company which owns and toll roads. It's called Athang. That's a fully owned platform under NIIF. And we have a project specific tie-up we have been doing with Zurich Airport. So that's my airports venture. Then under my second fund, which is called Strategic Opportunities Fund, this is a little bit like a private equity strategy. We are in a fundraise mode. We haven't closed the fund. The first fund we have already closed, and I'll show you who the investors are. The second fund, we are still in a fundraise mode. We are talking to investors. We have got some of the first 2 investors, and now we are in the process of onboarding the balance investors. This is following a little bit of a private equity strategy. We have done 2 investments. One is a large infrastructure debt financing platform, almost $2 billion in size now. And one is a healthcare platform, which is really owning hospitals all across the country. We own almost 23, 24 hospitals all over India. And this is the second largest hospital chain in the country. And then we have a third vehicle, which is really what we call a fund of funds vehicle, through which we have incubated 5 different kinds of funds. One is a pure climate focused fund. It is, as we speak, we are announcing the closure. When I say closure, which means I will finish the fundraise. This is about $700 million fund, possibly the largest single country focused climate fund focused in a private equity style. And that fund is doing water, solid waste management, electric buses, battery storage, different kinds of things as businesses they are incubating. Then we have a fund which is doing affordable housing all across the country. And then we have one affordable healthcare fund and 2 private equity focused funds. So again, in a nutshell, we have, I just want to show maybe this slide quickly. Across all of these sectors, you can say from core infrastructure to private equity, we have a dozen entities. And these are all businesses and companies under the NIIF structure. Each of these companies has their own management teams, employee base, teams, and they run their own businesses. So that's the third point I wanted to highlight. And the last point I wanted to make, as NIIF, I think we've been extremely fortunate to attract great network of partners. And again, the names you can see here are people who are actually investors, shareholders, joint venture partners. These are not MOUs or people who we are thinking here. These are real joint ventures or investors with us. The topmost corner is my parent investor, which is the Government of India, obviously, which is our largest investor. But NIIF, and probably I forgot to highlight, NIIF, the government has created as a public-private partnership, which means we are a private sector animal. Government has given us $3 billion, but they are a minority. They have actually given the majority stake in NIIF to all of these investors. Investors own 51% of NIIF. So that is our founding investor. Then we have some of the largest pension funds, and several are from Canada. As you can see, we have CPPIB, Ontario Teachers, PSP. We have Australia's largest pension fund, which is Australian Super as an investor. Then we have 2 of the sovereign wealth funds, Abu Dhabi Investment and Temasek from Singapore. We have the multilateral banks, which is Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, Asian Development Bank, New Development Bank, and the DFC from the United States. And we have some of the largest Indian financial institutions, which is HDFC, Kotak, ICICI, and Axis. All of these are financial investors into NIIF. On the right side are all our operating sector or railways, or in the renewable energy side. Then some of the bottom ones are global partners, so Dubai ports, Zurich Airport, CDC of UK, British Petroleum, and the bottom quartile is really our private equity partners. So I think, as I said, I'm happy that we've been able to attract great partners, and I'm looking forward to more partnerships from more Canadian investors, both financial and operating. I think that, Vipulji, with that, I'm going to close. Those are the 4 or 5 points I wanted to really share today. Happy to take if you have any questions.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for the fantastic presentation, Prasadji. Yes, I have a couple of questions for you, and thank you for the High Commissioner to join us back. So my first question is, as you just mentioned, NIIF investors also include a lot of Canadian funds, CPP investments, Teachers Pension Plan, Homers, etc. So can you tell us, what do the Canadian investors want from India? I mean, is there anything different than what the Singapore and Australian investors expect? Because we have a strong people-to-people ties between Canada and India, which is a bit more stronger than what we have with other countries. And what has NIIF been able to deliver for them so far?
So, Vipulji, I think I would say the Canadian investor. I don't want to compare and contrast investors, but clearly the Canadian investors are one of the most evolved and sophisticated investors, especially when it comes to infrastructure as an asset class. They understand it intimately. And what I think the great thing has been, obviously, whilst they are investors with NIIF, we work with them as partners on a lot of actual on-ground project situations, on some of the policy measures with the government, and they have been very forthcoming, proactive in engaging with the government, coming up with very constructive suggestions, and it's been great to work with them. So several of these policy measures which I showed you actually have happened in conjunction with some of our investor friends, and several of them were Canadian friends, and they have been very constructive in offering solutions. So I think that's been, so that's how the partnership works. So while they are financial investors, we operate really at a multidimensional level, is what I would say.
Okay. And NIIF is also an active member of the One Planet Sovereign Wealth Funds, a global platform that helps organizations understand climate change risks and explore investment opportunities around the transition to low emissions economy. Canada, under the present government, is talking big for a while about climate change and the low emissions economy. India, of course, is also betting big on green and renewable energy. So what role can NIIF play in bringing Canada and India closer on this particular file, which will provide massive opportunities for both?
So, I would say, as you said, rightly pointed out, we are a signatory to the framework. And I think we take that responsibility very seriously. And again, at a multiple levels, we are operating on those principles. So one is environment, and whether it's environment, social governance, as ESG it is called, is a very integral part of how we invest. We have one of the largest number of professionals, which we have employed across all our network. And every investment that we take up has to go through a strong ESG filter, is one way I will answer your question. Second is on a financing and investing side itself. As I outlined, we have actually focused on creating vehicles which will help in climate transition, in mitigation of this. I showed you the fund which we set up. It's called Green Growth Equity Fund. It's, as I said, largest ever climate-focused private equity fund, perhaps definitely in Asia, but might be in other parts of the world. We have another renewable energy venture which you have created, which is only doing renewable energy projects. We have done a smart metering venture, which is actually aiding conservation of power, efficiency, and all of that. So I think we are again operating this at a multiple levels. One is through our ethos and principles of investing, and secondly, actually creating vehicles. And we are happy to continue to partner with our Canadian friends actually on both of these initiatives. That's what I would like to think about this.
Sure. Thank you. Fair enough. Well said, Prasadji. So let me go back to the AHC, Anshumanji. I think we have come to a close. It went almost an hour over the scheduled time, but the presentations were so fantastic. You know, the experiences that we heard were so good. I think it was all more than worth it. So if you want to make any final comments before I give my closing remarks, and then we can end the session.
Thank you, Vipulji, and thanks to all the wonderful speakers we had today and the presentation and information which they provided. It only reinforces our strong belief that there is a lot of potential for Canadian investors in Indian infrastructure sector. We have demonstrated quite clearly in several of our presentations how a conscious effort has been made to monetize and to make investment easy in the Indian infrastructure sector for a range of investors, whether you are a small retail investor or whether you are a large pension sovereign fund, all range of opportunities are available. It's a growth-oriented market. As Mr. Prasad said, Canadian funds are very sophisticated, run by very smart people, and they have made a choice. They made a clear choice that the kind of returns which they are looking at, the Indian market, especially the Indian infrastructure sector, is going to provide. It was also emphasized that this is actually a closing window. Think of it as a kind of advanced tip on the market for you to invest here. The opportunities are going to become more competitive as we go ahead. So this is an early bird call for investing in India, of joining our growth story at this point and ride along with us as we grow and prosper. So again, thank you everyone. Special thanks to Minister Prasad Panda. He's been a good friend to us in Alberta. We have great ties with the government of Alberta. Thanks also to Mr. Amarjot Sandhu, on behalf of government of Ontario. Ontario is a major trade partner to us. With Alberta, we actually have investments in Alberta in hydrocarbon sector, in Northeast Gas Pipeline. Our companies are still there in Calgary, actually trying to restructure that deal. Minister knows that we do buy Alberta crude, but we buy it in Houston and not on the west coast of Canada. So, but again, thank you so much, Mr. Minister, for being here. Your presence elevates the whole conference and reinforces the strong faith we have in the growth potential of India-Canada partnership. Thank you also to all the investment partners, Mr. Wallace, from I think we had AIMCO. I don't see them, but thanks again for your time and presentation. To my Indian colleagues from NIIFM and Invest India, wonderful presentations. We couldn't have said it better. And thank you again, Mr. Vipuljani ji, for organizing this. We are, we have been a strong partner to you, and we hope to continue with working with you in future. Thank you again.
Sure. Thank you. Any last 30-second closing remarks, Minister Panda?
Sure. Thank you all, particularly our friends from India staying up late. Apologies, it took longer, but it's a very informative session. And I could reiterate the energy and the passion the diplomats like Anshuman ji and everyone else here in our embassy and in our consulates, the services are elevated. They are very responsive in consulates in Vancouver and Toronto as well. But the intentions are great, but we had to somehow find ways to take full advantage of this partnership for the benefit of both Canadians and Indians. We can improve both cultural relations and also strengthen and deepen the economic ties. There is a lot of potential. We only scratched on the surface. As I said, India with their ambitions of doubling and tripling their GDP and also infrastructure. Without infrastructure, I mean, infrastructure actually enables that growth and makes life better for the citizens of both India and Canada. So already we started that, but we need to take it to the next level. Given the geopolitical challenges in Asia and particularly in South Asia, we had to look at augmenting the relations, most trusting and dependable, respectable relations between Canada and India. Alberta will play its role, but other provincial governments and our federal government, I think everyone will step up, but India also make it easy for, particularly in our farm sector, because I was talking to Minister Mo, Premier Mo, and also our own agricultural department and ministers talked to me about the certain challenges in because India definitely needs our products, but and also we are so grateful for Indo-Canadians for their contributions, like Vipulji and everybody contributing in all sectors of Canadian economy in every province. So we are so grateful and thankful for their contributions to make a better Canada, better Alberta. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, sir. So Rahul Agarwal, as you know, Minister Panda has expressed a strong, keen interest in joining hands or MOUs between Invest Alberta and Invest India. So let us take that process forward. And so I'll just deliver my 30-second closing remarks. First of all, thank you to all the speakers for their very valuable insights and sharing their experiences and those wonderful PowerPoint presentations today. There's a lot of detail actually in at least 4 or 5 presentations we saw today. This session video will now be edited and posted on the IMEC website, on all the social media platforms, and it will be shared with all the speakers as well. We hope you can also now join us later at the in-person roundtables. The 4th Make in India conference will now take place in a couple of months. So stay tuned for that. And before we go, let me once again thank all the IMEC sponsors one final time. Efficience Canada, Skylink Capital Corp, Pevy Winning, ICICI Bank Canada, SBI Canada Bank, One Place, Akal Insurance Brokers, Home Hotel and Resort, our presenting sponsor for 2022, Tangentia, and of course, the High Commission of India in Ottawa for their tremendous support and guidance in putting these events together. So thank you everyone once again. The session is now closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.